Hi, it's Dr. Scott, here to introduce the Week 3 discussion of Kenneth Grahame and Wind in the Willows. And you're going to think you're hearing an echo. It's one reason I keep changing shirts and props so you don't get confused. But once again, we're dealing with a Scottish author colonized by the British. Mr. Grahame, yes, was Scottish, not British. Although the Brits have claimed him ever since because he's such a great writer, right? Okay. Once again, we're dealing with a man whose life was dogged by tragedies, especially the lives of his children. In this case, he had one son. That son was awkward his whole life. Commits suicide. Again, does this sound familiar? Commits suicide, the son, at the age of 20, while he's going up, as they say, to Oxford University. He's a student at Oxford University. And Grahame was just crushed by this death. Had an awkward marriage that never seemed warm at all, and then goes off into this life, would you believe it, as the Secretary of the Bank of England. So he's sort of the American equivalent of Mr. Wall Street. He's got this very high, very prestigious position in a bank of England, like the bank of the world at that time, from which he is fired or quits. It's never quite sure, and he gets a pension, and he goes off and he starts writing these weird things. So weird banker with tragic son and failed marriage goes off and writes about this kind of animal version of the boys' club. At least there was Wendy in Peter Pan. In this particular book, you've probably noticed, particularly if you're female, that there are virtually no females whatsoever. And he kind of retreats into this fantasy world inhabited by talking toads, swimming toads, boating toads, toads that cross-dress, I might add. I gave you a video clip for that, and I don't mean any implications by it. It's just part of the story. Toads who have a kind of mania, and that's literally the word that they used, for things like motor cars. Toad, who I think, and several actually, of our literary critics agree, is maybe one of the greatest characters in all of British literature. I love Toad, the same way I love Long John Silver. He's just a fascinating and amazing and funny and somehow a strangely realistic character. I think I mentioned in my intro video I have a friend or two who remind me terribly of Toady, and in the same lovable but uncontrollable way. So I'm waiting to hear what you think of all this. Now, please be careful to read the articles before you start discussing. There's a complicated life. I've only mentioned one or two or three things so far that you might want to focus on. There's many other oddities in Mr. Grahame's life which are worth pondering. I'm also going to double emphasize that if you're not hearing the humor in these two works, as with Alice in Wonderland, then I don't think you're reading the books at all. I mean, I find these works to be incredibly funny, often very satirical, often extremely painfully snarky, but also wonderfully, wonderfully funny. However, especially I think in the case of Wind in the Willows, there's this deep kind of poignancy of friendship and longing and nostalgia. The old Britain that's rapidly passing away as if it's flowing down the river and being overtaken by motor cars and soon to be wars and industry and hurry and bustle and all those things that Mr. Grahame was able to escape by getting himself either fired or resigned from the Bank of England, which he turned his back on and never looked back. So, let's go paddling down the river with our toad friends here. Can't wait to hear what you think of Mr. Grahame's life. Can't wait to see what you will pick out as important. Can't wait to see how you will respond to each other among the 96 of us that are flowing down the river of memory and childhood together in the Wind of the Willows. Start typing as soon as you're ready. 1, 2, 3, go.